A couple items of interest. A bicycle discussion with Dan Grunig of Bicycle Colorado. That's the second item on our agenda. And then we have Director of Community Services, no, Public Works, whatever his title is. We have Charlie Blostein here also to talk about some of the issues that came up last time regarding sidewalks, street width, pedestrian lighting, some things along the line of our last public hearing. Let's see if we could have a roll call here.
Commissioner Balkenstedt. Is Commissioner Brown?
Present.
Commissioner Coronado.
Present.
Commissioner Iteraria.
Here.
Commissioner Newfinke.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf. Commissioner Ranville.
Here.
Commissioner Samuelson.
Here.
Commissioner Stravopoulos.
Here.
And David did say that he'd be about an hour late. I think he'll be about 8 o'clock. So.
Okay. Well, we do have a quorum. Are there any suggested revisions to our agenda, additions? Seeing none. Bicycle discussion with Dan Grunig of Bicycle Colorado. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having me here, and I'll try to not ignore you over here. Thanks. Today I wanted to, I have a brief presentation that I can either go through, or if you want to ask questions or have discussions along the way, we can just kind of work our way through it. It's kind of text heavy at the beginning, but I've got some really cool photos and graphs at the end, so hang on with me there. You know, first a little bit about Bicycle Colorado. We are a statewide nonprofit that promotes bicycling, both road and mountain biking issues. We have 7,000 members across the state and 150 businesses that support our work. We do a lot of bicycle education training through Safe Routes to School, through adult commuter education classes. We do a lot of legislative work at the state capitol, helping pass a couple of bicycle safety bills that change some of the laws in the state that protect bicyclists on the road, created the Share the Road license plate, et cetera. So those are kind of the key things that Bicycle Colorado's working on. And myself, I've been in this position for 8 years, have served on Dr. Cogg's Transportation Advisory Committee for the last 4 years, and of course I'm heavily involved with following what CDOT's working on at the state level, transportation planning wise. First, I just want to tell folks how important bicycling is to the state. I mean, it's more than just a toy. It's more than just transportation. It's an economic generator for the state in terms of tax revenue and jobs. We have a lot of manufacturing, some of the biggest retailing of bicycle in the country, and our bicycle tourism is like the summertime ski industry, but instead of focusing on just a dozen ski resorts throughout the mountains, it's all over the state. We've got routes out in the Eastern Plains. I'm sure Littleton sees folks who are in town and coming to either bicycle or come through here on some of the major trails through the area, and is home to some of the biggest and most well-attended bicycle events in the state. So it's really become a mecca for cycling, and we're seeing a new expansion now beyond just a recreational style riding to more and more commuting, more and more kids riding their bike to school. So tonight, here's just a rough outline. I want to talk about some of the benefits of why I think it's good to include bicycling in our plans, in our designs, and in our communities. Take just a quick look at what's going on in the city of Littleton, and then show you the cool stuff, the tools available to you about what's being designed now in other communities and other parts of the world even that help accommodate cyclists and keep motorized traffic moving also. Bicycling is great. It's cheap. It lets the roads last longer. It makes people healthier. It is a simple solution to a lot of the complex problems we're trying to solve. As being involved with planning, being involved with governance, you get hit in a lot of different directions with a lot of different problems. And increasing the amount of people bicycling helps address a lot of those problems, whether it's pollution, It's even education. Kids who are healthy and active, they arrive at school ready to learn instead of drinking a 24-ounce Mountain Dew in the back of the minivan, coming out into school and trying to settle down and get ready to learn. There's a lot of benefits, and then it's a lot of benefits for employers and businesses because employees are healthier, fewer sick days. They are also more productive. And I didn't throw any references up here. If you want the studies, I'll give you all the studies. But these are just things that I think make common sense. I think we probably know this when you sit down and think about it for a minute. If you can take a trip by bike instead of by car, that car trip wears out the road a little bit every time it goes over that road. A little bit, a little bit, a little bit. If you transfer that to a bicycle that weighs 20 or 30 pounds, you don't have that wear or tear. And then you also reduce the need of congestion, reduce the need for expanded lanes to accommodate more of those cars. So those are just some of the things, cycling does. And I know one of the things that's you don't often think about, but getting people out of their cars and getting them biking and walking gets more eyes on the street, which is the exact thing criminals don't like. They don't want to be seen. They want to be in areas where nobody's watching, nobody's paying attention, no one's stopping to talk, and creating that kind of neighborhood connection between folks when you know your neighbors and you know your kids walking to school and everyone is out there together, I think also helps solve a lot of the issues that we're trying to deal with at the community level. So where's Littleton now? I mean, the South Platte Trail is one of the probably most popular amenities in the state for cycling. I mean, I don't have the counts on that, but it is just heavily used, and it creates an important north-south thoroughfare. It's basically a bicycle freeway for Littleton, and I think that's an incredible asset. Getting another north-south route would be something to be looking at, as well as the east-west connections. I know the new Mineral Boulevard bike lanes, we were just talking beforehand, have seen a lot of use and gaining more popularity and beginning to create some of those east-west connections. And we'll get into it in a little bit when we get to some of the ideas, but you don't always bike on the route that you drive on. And so you don't have to always think about the best place to bike as being the major arterials. We have other ways of getting bikes along very nearby and getting them through very quickly. Littleton also has fantastic transit connections. I mean, being kind of sandwiched in there between the light rail lines that are currently in place, as well as a lot of bus connections. And RTD allows bikes on trains 24 hours a day, and in fact was the first transit department to include bike racks on all their buses. So it's been a very embracing transit organization of connecting with bicycles. In fact, that's how I got here this evening. I rode downtown to catch the train and took the train to the downtown Littleton station and then just rode the few blocks up here, and it was a fantastic way. And I just didn't have time to ride the whole way this evening. So excellent. And like any other Colorado community, I'm sure you're seeing the projections for coming population growth. And if we get another 1 million people in the state in 20 years, we don't want another 1 million cars. I mean, how are we going to possibly accommodate that? We can't build enough lanes to accommodate all those trips to be taken solely by car. So helping to spread out the load, give people a better choice on how they transport themselves is something that would be really important. And anything here I'm missing. I mean, I'm not a resident of Littleton, but I do come through here on quite a few occasions. Is there, the downtown area is important. Is there anything here that I'm missing that you think is really good in existing conditions?
There is a number of smaller trails that are more regional, Highland Canal Trail and other ones that connect with South Platte that you'll see around. So I'd say the Mary Carter Greenway Trail, but also the, which is the South Platte, but also the other ones that connect to it and get around.
Yeah, those provide some east-west, don't they, or across the
Some east-west and South Suburban is working towards improving connectivity on a lot of those. So some of them are more isolated. But
yeah, and Dan, I mentioned to Dan too briefly that Charlie has actually gotten a grant from Tri-County Health to do the pedestrian bicycle plan for the whole entire city too. So we have that coming as well, which should help us as well. So connect those two.
Can't change what you don't plan for, right?
The other thing that Dan and I talked about briefly was just the connection we have along Mills Creek from downtown, which is just a great bicycle connection to Mary Carter and to downtown. So we do have that as well.
Yeah. So definitely a lot of good things working for the city already. You know, one of the neat programs a lot of communities in Colorado are turning towards is the bicycle-friendly community. It's a national promotion done by the League of American Bicyclists. And it's all available on their website, bikeleague.com. But cities are evaluated on these 5 different areas. They call them the 5 E's. And it's a broad-based approach that incorporates not just, you know, your transportation folks, but it includes law enforcement, includes your education, includes the community, and understanding that just putting in a bike lane isn't enough. I mean, it's really broader than that if you want to encourage a lot of transportation. So I encourage you to look at this, and I'm going to talk this evening a bit, focusing more on kind of the engineering and education pieces, but I'm happy to go into any of the other E's if you'd like to. One of the things that's really, I think, sweeping the country now is communities and states adopting complete streets policies. And these are policies, they can be very simple. The city of Chicago has a 1-sentence complete streets policy, just saying we will accommodate the needs of bicyclists and pedestrians in our transportation projects. You can get in, once you adopt that policy, you can move into the much more details. Now, the State Department of Transportation just did this last fall, saying that they will include bicycles and pedestrians in all their projects, planning, maintenance work. And then they also included sometimes when there's exceptions. So it's not 100%. It's not like you need to build a sidewalk through a cornfield or you need to have a bike lane on every single road. It certainly allows for flexibility. Usually if there's non-motorized use is prohibited from a certain roadway is one exception. If the costs are more than 20 or 30% of the corridor, or if there's just no perceived potential use, are kind of the ways that CDOT put it together. And those were in line with the Federal Highways Administration's guidelines on exceptions for this. So the Department of Transportation has that, and I mention it because that's a tool for communities. A lot of times with the state highway coming through your town is often one of the biggest barriers to getting non-motorized users across your town, because that's often a larger road and faster road. And now this is a policy that local communities can use to work with the Department of Transportation to think about all the users of that right-of-way and see if you can get a brighter crosswalk or a slower speed or a traffic signal inserted near the school, or lots of different things. Definitely a bike lane connection through that area. And then the state legislature followed up and took the same language that the Transportation Commission of CDOT had adopted and put it into statute last year and was signed into law by Governor Ritter. So it's also a statute now. So we've got a policy and statute, one of only 3 states in the country that have that double layer approach to complete streets. A number of other communities in Colorado, Fort Collins, Boulder, Colorado Springs, all have complete streets policies. City of Denver Council will be considering it by the end of the calendar year, as we're told. It's quite a range in political philosophies in those communities. I think I want to share one of the important things that, although all those benefits that we talked about bicycling at the beginning, one I want to get back to is that freedom of choice. Because if we build our roads to only accommodate one type of use, one type of user, a motor vehicle, then we're kind of dictating to people how they have to get around. If we build communities that have schools and retail and housing close to one another and build our transportation system to give the people the ability to choose if walking is the best way, or if biking is the best way, or if transit is the best way, or if driving their car is the best way, then they're going to make the choose the choice that's best for them. And I think a lot of times you'll see in all the data, it's people want that choice. They want to be able to be more active and be more healthy and have that opportunity. So I put that forward, and it's something that that is certainly coming throughout the state. So what is the reason people don't bike and walk? The surveys say they're scared. They hear, the road's too fast, I can't get across this road, I wouldn't let my kid do that. It's, the stories you hear, there's not a way for me to get there, which is oftentimes just another way of saying, I think it's too scary. And one of the biggest statistics that I want to stress to folks is motor vehicle speed is such a factor in your ability to survive a crash. If you think about it, most of our arterials are at 35 miles an hour. Well, which really means effective travel speed is 40, 45 or so. So your chance of surviving a crash as a pedestrian at that kind of speed with a motor vehicle is almost none. You bring that down to 30 miles an hour, you got a 50-50 chance. You bring that down to 20 miles an hour, you got some pretty good odds. So vehicle speed is just critical in terms of breeding a safe environment on the roadway system. And we'll talk about some ways to do that that embrace all the users of the road. So I know it's been text heavy. I'm starting to get to some photos here in a minute. A lot of things being developed. Bike lanes you're familiar with. I'll go through some photos of those. Example of bicycle boulevards. These are the roads I mentioned that are adjacent to the arterial road, usually a block or two off. It's being used heavily in Portland and in Vancouver. And it's what they found was that even if you put a bike lane on a road, it's a 35-mile-an-hour road, confident cyclists will use them, but families, folks who are novices on bikes still don't feel comfortable even with that bike lane just because of the high volume and high speed of the motorized traffic. So by creating a parallel, we call it a bicycle boulevard, on, if you have a grid system, which a lot of the city does, you're able to go a couple blocks off parallel. And it's normally a quiet residential road. If you mark it well and turn the stop signs so that you create a thoroughfare, so it's fast, so it's a competitive route for the non-motorized users, that helps. But then you think, well, won't the cars just jump over there if it's backed up? Well, the way they solve that is every few blocks, installing some kind of bollards or median that would force motorized traffic to turn right, but allow the non-motorized traffic to travel straight through. So we've got some photos of what the bicycle boulevards look like. They're also frequently users of the sharrows, or shared lane arrows, which is like a bike lane without the lane stripe, kind of indicating to both motorists and bicyclists where is a safe place to ride. Treatment at intersections. Intersections are the #1 place where a car-bike crash or a car-pedestrian crash happens. So the attention to those can really make or break whether or not the system is going to work. If you have a good bike lane but you get to a really dangerous intersection, it could create a barrier that folks aren't willing to even use the bike lane. And then there's a new edition of the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices that include a lot more things like the sharrow and a lot more signage on how to indicate to cyclists and motorists how to share the road and how to get around. The AASHTO guide on this is the green book that engineers use to design the roadways. There's a specific book on the design of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. It's getting a little dated now. There's a new one they've been promising to come out with over the past couple of years. It's getting closer, but it's still a good one in terms of the basics of what a bike lane looks like, how to get it across a right-hand turn lane, how to design an intersection and a separated bike path. So here's some shots. This could be, any arterial in Denver, 4-lane road, probably a 30 or 35 mile an hour road. We do have a sidewalk along each side, although there's not a lot of buffer between the pedestrian and the traffic. Generally is probably a place where you're not going to see a lot of cyclists. just by simply restriping it. All you're paying for is paint here, is you've changed it to a single lane in each direction with a left-hand turn lane in the middle. Now you've got room for the bike lanes, which also creates a buffer for the pedestrians, so they feel more comfortable because they're a little separated from the motorized traffic. And I went to a conference that this was presented, and I'm sorry I haven't gotten the study, but the engineer presenting showed how this alignment actually increases the motorized throughput over the first 4-lane that we started with. Because on the 4-lane alignment like this, left-hand turns are very difficult and slow. You have to cross multiple lanes of traffic. And so oftentimes at the queue, you only can cross at the end. In this alignment, you're only crossing a single lane of traffic, and folks are able to get along, as well as getting some trips out of cars and onto bikes or onto walking in that alignment. And then the last stretch is accommodating the pedestrians with a refuge island in the middle and a bright crosswalk to attract them to cross here. So that's, yeah, please.
Dan, just to clarify, in all the configurations of this, it appeared there was no parking allowed, and although down on the right, maybe a half block away, there's something there. I can't tell if it's a car parked or what the situation is, and I don't see no parking signs, but you have a bike lane in this configuration with no parking allowed in that bike lane.
Yeah, I would believe so. This is an example of, here's the original configuration in a way to, in a very cost-effective manner. You're not adding any asphalt, you're not adding any width, but you're able to accommodate many more users and increase your motorized throughput is the example. I do have some slides coming up that show parking included and some ideas of what to do with bike lanes around parking. So how much does it cost? Portland did a 300-mile network of bikeways for the cost of a single mile of urban freeway. I think that's a pretty good value. And then not only at the community level, but at the household level. After housing expense, transportation is typically a household's second largest expense. And if residents need to have a car in order to get around, in order to get to work or get to the grocery store, it puts quite a strain on the budget of the household. Now, a lot of ways you can do it is by able to shift, maybe taking a second car out of the household. It's still having a car for the trips that are needed that you can only do by car, but being able to use bike, transit, walking to connect and reduce that need for that second or third car in the household. Saves folks a lot of money and gives them a broader discretionary spending pool, which I know is important to a lot of communities who want to keep the spending in their community. So here's an example of a bike lane next to parking. I think it's a little close to the park cars here. We talk about a shy zone, kind of you want to get out of the door zone, but it certainly on both sides you've got the bike lane now, and it gives you a bit of a buffer from the motorized traffic. Here's a better example where when you're close to that parking. Building a 5-foot lane. If you don't have parking, like in that road diet section, where we look at 4 foot is the minimum standard. If you start going wider, 6 feet, 7 feet, you need to add some kind of buffer because otherwise cars start jumping into it, thinking it's another travel lane. But we've got some other photos of that coming up also. Here's the buffered bike lane where it's adjacent to the parking, and if you look on the cross section across the bottom, the parking's 8 foot, then there's that 2 foot shy zone. You've got the bike lane and then another buffered bike lane, and I think didn't Mineral Boulevard get a second stripe, 2 stripes against it, so you've got a buffered example there. And this is, of course, a one-way road. You could do that in both directions, but you can put the buffered bike lane here. The other option we're seeing in communities, and they're calling it more like a cycle track or buffered bike lane also, is where you flip the bike lane and the parking, so that the parking creates a barrier between the travel lane of traffic, and then the bike lane is up against the sidewalk. It does create, you need to be aware of the pedestrian traffic exiting a motor vehicle as they're parking. But the motorist also realizes there's something a little different going on in that situation. And so it gets pedestrians and bikes off to the side and parking closer to the lane of travel so that the parking doesn't have to cross the bike lane to get to it. I've ridden on this in a couple cities, and it's pretty comfortable. The frequency of parking isn't that great that there's that much conflict with the pedestrians crossing the bike lane, and you certainly feel a lot more protected from the higher speed travel lane. And I think I jumped when I was talking about the bike boulevards. These are the key points. One of the things I didn't mention is, in addition to turning the stop signs and then inserting the bollards to turn traffic, you also, when you get to a major intersection, major arterial that this will cross, you need to make sure that there is a good bright or easy signaled crossing for these. When Vancouver, British Columbia put this in, they found that on a normal bike lane on their arterial, they found something like 80 to 85% of the users were male. And they put in this bike boulevard a couple blocks off, and they found out that it was the opposite. 60, 70, 80% are female and children. And it was really a much quieter environment. And the Denver City Chamber of Commerce just did an exchange with Portland, and they learned that the property values on homes along this bicycle boulevard have jumped up since they've been installed in Portland. So it's also a property value generator. Just because now that street becomes a safer street. Kids can play in the front yard again. When the ball inevitably rolls out into the street, there's less motorized traffic. You still have access. You still can, pull your car up front and unload groceries, but you don't have through traffic coming through, because every couple of blocks that through traffic needs to make a right-hand turn. And so it becomes less convenient to operate a motorized vehicle. Those bollards or a cutout median allows the cyclist to continue straight through.
Dan, I had a question too. If you could go back to the parking adjacent to traffic. We have on-street handicap parking in some areas, and because of the protracted nature of exiting and entering, especially if they have motorized assistance, it seems like the bike lane adjacent to pedestrian, adjacent to the sidewalk.
The sidewalk, yeah.
You're going to be blocked for, a couple minutes, several minutes. It seems like it precludes having handicap parking on the street. Yet if, you want access to a business, every block or something like that, it seems like there's a conflict or a difficulty there. Is there a way to address that?
Conflict for the disabled user to be able to get across the bike lane?
Well, yeah, if there's a wheelchair ramp that's deploying a wheelchair and it's, on the side toward the sidewalk, it's going to be filling more or less, the handicap vans, many handicap places in a parking lot have significant extra room. If you have the bike lane on the opposite side of the parking, then that's where that's going to happen. You don't have the van putting a wheelchair out
right onto the sidewalk.
A lane of traffic. You have it occurring in the bike lane, and that seems problematic to me, I guess.
I haven't seen a particular situation, just off the top of my head. I would think that a lot of, if it's parallel parking, like in this example, handicap space would be closest to the intersection. Is usually where that's reserved because it's closest to the ramp to get onto the sidewalk. And I can imagine a way of maybe bringing the bike lane in a little bit if we've got more width for a sidewalk there that allows kind of an unloading area for the handicap vehicle. Just off the top of my head, I haven't seen it addressed specifically. But that's
What does happen at the intersection then, typically, with this kind of configuration of bike lane? They do merge with the sidewalk, basically? Is that it? Or do they end up on the traffic side?
No, they would continue as traffic. A lot of times the parking stops short of the intersection, brings the bike lane back in parallel to, or you can put in a concrete median in front of the parking to continue the division. And there's the treatment when you're on the far side like this for a cyclist who needs to make a left-hand turn becomes a challenge. And so there's things like the bike boxes, and I think I have a photo of one coming up that help accommodate that, or a cyclist can cross the lane and wait at the light to go with the next crossing, kind of a three-point turn, if we can call it that. But yeah, the bike comes back in parallel with the cars when the parking stops.
I'll quit pestering you in a minute. It brought up another issue, I guess, in my mind. Although it's no picnic to bike when it's snowing or there's snow on the ground, it seems like this configuration would make it almost impossible to keep the bike lane cleared during the day or evening whenever the parking is occurring. It would be a convenient place for all the businesses to shovel the snow from their sidewalks into the bike lane. Probably not the best for bikers either. So I guess I see some difficulty with this configuration.
Well, you could shovel the snow into the parking lane too, I suppose.
Well, when it ends up in a parking place, then many times it's mashed flat by people coming and going. The bikes have more difficulty.
You are absolutely right, but getting snow cleared is out of bike lanes and the whole, especially when the sidewalks are built right up against the road without any kind of buffer or median between the sidewalk. That is a real challenge because there's just not enough places for that to go. Where do you choose? Do you leave it in the lane? Do you leave it in the bike lane? Do you leave it on the sidewalk? And it's expensive to actually come and haul it out. I don't know if there's a perfect solution. Certainly, you want to keep the sidewalks clear primarily, and in a heavy snowfall time and a time when it's very icy on the road, you're going to see a reduced number of cyclists on the road, and typically ones that are a little more experienced and can work in the travel lane where it's clear. But certainly, you want to put an emphasis on getting those bike lanes clear as quickly as possible, so that there is a separated place to ride. We get some of those runway heaters like they have out at DIA drive along.
Or Charlie has some of those.
That doesn't cost anything, I'm sure. Well, I apologize. I don't have a picture of a bike box with me this evening. I thought I had thrown one in there. But that's in a high conflict area. A lot of times the bike lane is now being painted a color like green. The entire lane from white line to white line, especially when that bike lane needs to cross over, say, a right-hand turn lane, and you need the bikes that are on the right side of traffic to continue straight through. That's a perfect area to let motorists and cyclists know, hey, this is a place I need to pay special attention. And then an extension of that is, like we mentioned, when a bicyclist comes to a stoplight, but they need to cross over several lanes of traffic to make a left-hand turn, a bike box creates a spot painted next to the crosswalk that cyclist is able to go up alongside the traffic and then pull in front of the motorized traffic and get to that far left-hand lane, so they're able to be the first one through the intersection to make their left-hand turn. So that's some of the new designs that are coming out. That's not included yet in the MUTCD, but a lot of communities are testing it out and seeing good feedback on its implementation. And then I just have a couple more quick slides and then invite more questions. On the education side, Safe Routes to School has really been making substantial changes in the state. Getting kids to bike and walk to school. When I went to school, almost 2 out of every 3 kids biked and walked to school. You know, in Colorado, the latest data was about 6% bike and 8% walk. And so we've transferred a lot of those trips to kids being driven to school, and you see the backup of the queue, of the line of parents waiting to drop the kids off at school. And now, all of a sudden, the place where you want the kids to walk has become one of the most dangerous places because everyone's late, everyone's on the cell phone, you've got lined up in the queue, and you want to get them there. Safe Routes to School is a federally funded program that is 100% federal funds administered through the Department of Transportation that provides money for infrastructure changes, like putting in a crosswalk or a bike lane or an off-street path or a new signal light or whatever you need around a particular school. And then it also provides for non-infrastructure funding, which is education and encouragement. And Bicycle Colorado has worked with a number of school districts and communities around the country, around the state, teaching Safe Routes to School. That's really our expertise. We have a mobile classroom, a van or trailer with kids' bikes of all sizes. We come into a school and work with the phys ed teacher to get every student through 2 classes of pedestrian safety, crosswalk safety, driveway safety, as well as helmet fitting. You can include helmets in the grant, or low-cost helmets. We also can provide those for about $9 a child. And we get them an on-bike training. We recreate street decisions that they need to make at crosswalks. They learn the proper skills on how to bike, how to stop quick, how to turn, how to signal, how to look behind you, and get them the skills to get on the right steps so that they can use bicycle to get around. And I think actually Littleton and Centennial may be collaborating on a grant application due for this fall.
All right.
And then the adults, commuter education, we work with businesses through their workplace wellness or greening initiatives, just in terms of getting more employees to bike and walk. Again, employees are healthier, fewer sick days, more productive, and we teach them more than just the traffic skills, but also kind of the tricks of the trade of how to stash a week's worth of clothes in your office, or how to freshen up after riding a few miles, or we also give feedback to the employer on providing secure indoor parking for bikes in a changing area, things that make it easier, keeping a bike pump there, or some tools available for in case you need to change a tire before you go home. And the Guaranteed Ride program is something a lot of employers already take part in with RTD, and hopefully it's not pouring on me tonight when we leave, so I can, in case I need to use that. So we went over the benefits of bicycling, looked at the current status in Littleton and some available tools to you. So at this point, you know, I'm happy to answer any questions or talk about any discussions if you want to talk more detailed about the downtown area or whatever you'd like.
I have a question on the Denver bicycle sharing, and I think one of the things we had mentioned or talked about was, I'm curious, how do you get connected? We have the Littleton downtown transit stop, and so how difficult is it, or what is the cost of putting up a bike sharing station at the downtown Littleton transit facility?
I think that's a great idea. Bike sharing, and it's like bicycles as transit. If you're not familiar with the red bikes running around downtown Denver everywhere, there's now 500 bicycles that dock in special bike racks that are solar-powered bike racks that have a kiosk there, and allows you to check out those bikes for the first 30 minutes for free as long as you take them to another docking station. And there's now 40 of those throughout downtown Denver. They have a couple in Cherry Creek and a couple down at DU. And you need to pay either a daily fee of $5 to get access to the system, or the better deal is an annual membership of about $65, I think, and it gives you a swipe card that you just walk up to the bikes and you swipe your card over the sensor, and it unlocks and it gives you a bike. If you keep it for more than half an hour, it starts charging you like $1 for the second half an hour, $2 for the next half hour, and it increases so that if you keep it for an 8-hour day, it would have been better just to go to a bike shop and rent a bike for the day. It's designed to have the quick turnaround, and it works fantastic with transit. I think that's what you've identified is folks coming off of the light rail line and taking a trip a few blocks away would be a perfect use of it. B-Cycle is a company that creates the software and the bikes, and then their product was purchased by the Denver Bike Share, which is a nonprofit running the system. So I can put you in contact with their executive director and their information. I know they're rolling out a compatible system in Boulder. There was a RFP issued by the city of Boulder for a bike share program, and B-Cycle won that, and the systems, I understand, are going to be compatible, so you can use your membership card in either system. So yeah, I think it's certainly something that's scalable, and they're hoping to expand the system, doubling the system in the future years should they get another grant. And it's really changing how people get around downtown. It's pretty exciting.
Great.
And can you talk a little bit more about the ideal interface between bicycling and public transportation? Because I think given the distances and given the weather, I mean, it's unrealistic to, you talk a lot about how biking can cut down the number of cars and stuff like that. The reality is counting on a bicycle as your, sole means of year-round transportation in Denver is restricted to only, I've got some friends who've lived here for 30 years and have never owned a car, and they're just on bikes, but they don't have kids and, work very close to where they live. It's a fairly specialized environment. I think that for most people, even for you, the connection between public transportation and biking becomes as key, in my opinion, as having bike lanes and other things in terms of making viable, and I just would like to hear a little bit more about that.
Especially if you're trying to go car-free or car-light in your household, certainly connecting to transit opens up opportunities for a cyclist that you don't have just under the distance you can travel yourself. One of the things coming with the B-Cycle and the downtown hub at Union Station will be a bike station, is what it's calling, where it's a commuter hub that allows you to say you're taking the train downtown, but you work a mile or two away from Union Station. You could leave your bike at this commuter parking station at the train station overnight and then have your bike there the next day when you connect. And so you could also set up bike stations, say at the end of the line or at downtown for that kind of commuting connection. In terms of, you'll see a lot of, I think a lot of the buses are at capacity with the 2 bike racks on front. I know RTD has looked at a 3 bike rack configuration, as well as with their new low floor buses, if you've seen some of those, the potential of putting some hanging racks inside the bus is being explored. None of those have been implemented yet. Certainly the express coaches have the under luggage carriers that carry a lot of bikes. You'll see that on the longer haul routes. I think the importance is providing that good connection to the transit stop, to this transit station, so that there is a place to park. It's well lighted, hopefully covered, and RTD also uses a lot of bike boxes, the storage cabinets that you're able to park your bike in overnight also. But on those days when it's just too tough to ride, beyond, you should hopefully be close enough you could walk to transit. And then also throughout Boulder and Denver now, there's a car share program starting similar to the B-Cycle bike share, but actually where you're a member and there's a car parked in an area, usually near a transit area. And in fact, I'm a member, and you get a little key fob that you swipe across the windshield, and there's a sensor there. It unlocks the car. The keys are inside, and you just pay for the use of that car. I think it's $6 an hour and 30 cents a mile. So for those occasions when you absolutely need a car to go pick up something too big to carry by bike or whatever, you can jump on a car share. So there's lots of alternatives, I think, coming in online, so that you aren't, forced to not be able to travel if you don't have a car.
Anyone else?
I have another one.
Jenny again.
All right, I like the bicycle boulevard option that I saw in the pictures, in the sense of the widths. I know for myself, I'm more of a recreational rider, and I have children, and so riding close to busy traffic is a concern. And so the skinny, narrow bike lanes just are not very accommodating for families. So it's interesting to see the bicycle boulevards, and it would be interesting to see how, like you talked about, intersections with bollards set up. It'd be interesting to see. Now, are there any bicycle boulevards in Denver implemented, or is that more so in other cities that, so I'm just curious, are there examples that we can?
Sure. The closest one I think you can see is in Boulder. Boulder has a couple of them, and Denver is looking at it strongly as part of their Denver Moves bicycle, pedestrian, and trail master plan that they're currently undertaking, because sometimes your arterial just doesn't have enough room. And there was one thing I wanted to mention kind of related to that when we talked about the traffic speeds of cars and how do you fit a bike lane in when you can't, there's no more right-of-way, you can't expand the road. How do you add a 4-foot bike lane on each side? And it's often interesting when you take a look at the existing lane width. Typically we would build a road with a 12-foot wide lane, but a lot of times, if the road is a 35-mile-an-hour road, a 30-mile-an-hour road, the design speed of that road is quite a bit higher, and that's why you get a lot of people speeding, because they feel more comfortable. The lane's as wide as an interstate. I might as well go a little faster here. It's clear, and there's nothing in my way. If you shrink that lane down a little bit, a foot or two, and you've got a couple of lanes, you shrink each of those down to 11 feet to 10.5 feet. It's still wide enough for buses, semis, fire trucks to get through, but it gives the driver a little bit of sense of, I got to hang up the phone, something's going on here, I feel a little tight here. And it brings down that travel speed, and it buys you enough room to get in that 4-foot bike lane along the side. And so that's one of the ways that we help get the travel speed down with just changing how we paint. We don't need to add more asphalt. We can just simply narrow the lanes a little bit, and that's also falls under that heading of road diet on the slides that I shown earlier, is just kind of shrinking the lanes and adding the bike lane and keeping the 2 travel lanes if you'd like.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, which road is it in Boulder or roads that has the bicycle boulevard?
I'll have to get that for you. I don't recall their names off the top of my head.
Has it been fairly successful, or, I mean, it looks like you take up a full lane of traffic to implement that. Has it been pretty successful as far as that reduced amount of vehicle traffic?
The residents along the road, my understanding, really enjoy it, just because the less motorized traffic. But it is. I mean, any lane is a shared lane for bicyclists and motorists, and so it just kind of puts it out there with the marking saying, "Hey, just think about this. You're very likely to see a non-motorized user in this lane. Don't be shocked or surprised. Be on the lookout."
Or of a share row?
Yeah, exactly. You would use sharrows along a bike boulevard instead of a bike lane, and you would put them right out in the middle of the lane for everybody
Okay,
to
but
see.
the bicycle boulevard is a dedicated lane for bicycles, or no? And then sharrows, I'm kind of, because sharrows, that's both, whereas the bicycle
did I skip?
boulevard, is that more of a sharrow, or is it a dedicated?
So a bike boulevard, this is a lane that is for cars and bikes.
Okay.
It's typically a residential road adjacent to the arterial or parallel to the arterial. So cars are still allowed on the road, but you make this road a fast route for a bicyclist by, at the intersections, instead of having to stop every block or two for a 4-way intersection, when we say turn the stop signs, is like making this the preferred route, that you don't have to stop. If you're a bicyclist, so it's a fast route. It needs to be competitive to get to allow the cyclist to compete with other modes. And then at each intersection or every other intersection, that's where you would install either some bollards or a median that had cut-throughs the width of a bike lane that would allow the bicycles to go straight through, but a motorized user would need to turn right. They couldn't go straight through. And that's the examples I think Boulder has of where you're going down a road as a motorized user and all of a sudden you can't continue straight. You need to make a turn. But non-motorized users are given the chance to continue straight through. So it is a shared road, but because of that, perceived hassle of having to make a right-hand turn in a couple blocks, you lose all that through traffic. It stays on the arterial adjacent to it for the motorized users.
So it still provides access for the vehicles, but it's inconvenient for the vehicles, but convenient for bikes.
Yeah, less convenient for a motor vehicle and it gives bikes a chance to get down the road as fast as if they were on the arterial bike lane that probably didn't have any stop signs on it. So, okay.
Dan, if I can follow that, I don't know how, I assume you're fairly familiar with them. So basically we'll be talking like instead of adding a bike lane on Broadway, taking either Sherman or Pennsylvania, opening up the stop signs like you would on Logan, but permitting bicycle traffic to go through. Because on Logan, if I take Logan, I'm not going to hit a lot of four-way stop signs. So it is kind of a backup through. If Broadway is fairly full, I may take Logan going north and south. But I typically won't take Sherman or Pennsylvania because I'm going to hit a four-way sign every, intersection or every other intersection. You're talking about opening that up so that bicycles won't hit any four-way signs. There will be just two-way signs controlling the east-west traffic as there already is, but installing bollards or some other things that forces the vehicles to not use us at the thoroughfare.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
I've also seen instead of a bollard, maybe a turning circle that only allows you the right-hand exit or whatever. So that's exactly right. And then when a Logan or when it hits a major east-west arterial, you're going to hit a stoplight.
So when you get to Evans or you get to Hamden or you get to any of the ones like you would right now.
Yeah, and so you need a welcoming intersection there to allow the folks coming with the kid in the trailer, a decent crossing time, easy to trigger a lighting mechanism, and just a clear route to get them through and across that wide intersection.
Seems like we have that more or less on Powers, let's say east of Windermere up to Broadway, although maybe not specifically with the signage, and then perhaps on Cayley, probably more than Ridge Road from the cemetery. That's kind of our east-west low speed, but more bike-friendly than some of the others.
Well, and I think that happens anyway. I mean, my son bikes to school whenever the weather permits it, and he actually gets up on time in the morning. But one of the things when he first started biking that we had talked about and had gone and done the routes is, stay off Littleton Boulevard and Windermere and get off it, and do take the side residential streets because there's not going to be as much traffic over there. Because unfortunately, a lot of times there's a choice between either being on the sidewalk or being on the road, both of whom are less than optimal choices. But I know a lot of times I've done it when I've taken my kids. We've talked about that with us who've taken our kids or taught our kids bikes. You will always find the quieter residential street. So I think a lot of bicyclists already use some of the side streets as the safer ones. What you're talking is making the signage more obvious for the motorists and the intersections more welcoming for the bicyclists.
Another thing that's done with the signage beyond just kind of a shero on the road is actually the street signs, adding a bike symbol to that street sign. It's something that's just even a sticker, if you have room on the sign, that's an inexpensive way of doing it. If you have a little more funding, the new MUTC talks about including destination and distance on a sign is really the information the cyclists need. You know, downtown Littleton, 2 miles this way, Mary Carter Greenway, 1.5 miles this way, you know, and give them that distance and direction. It's being replaced. In fact, you know, the old numbered bike route systems, I think, are going away in most communities, and we're going to see that changing around the metro area and more distance destination places. And as well as it being, you know, a little tourism draw too, of knowing where that park is, or knowing where that amenity or the museum or the cultural things that make the community great, pointing them out, because the signs aren't used just by bicyclists. You know, they'd be used by anybody else in that public right of way.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Dennis?
If you don't mind, yeah, Sergey had a question you want to ask.
Oh,
I just have one quick one. Could you talk a little bit about a bicycle system and one of the things that happens when you put in bike lanes, if it leaves you off somewhere where there's no place to go, and how you put together a system so people can actually get around the community, not just, you know, for 2 miles down a road?
Is your question, should you put in the bike lane that's dead ends, or?
Well, as a community starts to put in a bicycle system, there's obviously going to be gaps in that system. So how do you go about building it so that it's logical, I guess, is my question.
Well, I think one of the things is that it's hard to know everyone's trip start and trip destination. And so even if you're getting a bike lane on just a few blocks, it might actually serve a great amount of people if it's nearby a school and whatnot. And so I actually encourage communities to go ahead and begin putting that in, because it also highlights where the missing links are. If you keep waiting, and you know, it's that old saying, don't let perfect get in the way of good. If you get it started and you identify those links, you also start building more users, and they in turn ask for that, because it's usually the tough parts. You know, it's the parts that there's going to need to be some tough decisions made that are those missing links. You know, it's actually pretty easy to go through when you've got, you know, 14, 16-foot wide lanes and add bike lanes. You can go stripe those through, and no one's going to raise a ruckus or be upset or whatever. It's when you get on those really tight sections, and you got to look at creative things in terms of parking, in terms of lane width, in terms of road diets. Those are going to take a lot more involvement from the community and from decision makers. And I'd say don't wait to put in the easy ones to solve all the tough ones. Let's go ahead and get the low-hanging fruit in, get that going, and keep ticking off the list, working at those really challenged places. So.
Thank you very much.
Just one last
Okay,
quick
make it
question.
quick. We've got about a minute left.
Okay. There's two types of cyclists, obviously, on trails. I'm thinking particularly recreational and commuting cyclists. And I wonder, do you see a lot of conflicts between those two? And then also, what would you consider the maximum distance for a commuter to cycle year-round, I guess?
Okay, let me take the last one first. You know, you'll see folks commute 10, 15 miles one way. I think they are not very common. You will find a bicycle works best for trips about 3 miles or less. And I think that's when you're working on planning, that's the type of trips that people are most likely to leave the keys on the counter and grab the bike, because biking has a time advantage, a parking advantage, and you get some quick fresh air, and you're not so far out there you're affected by a quick change in the weather. So I think that's the, you know, what I'd recommend. But there's still folks that travel the long distances, but they're going to find a way no matter what if they're inclined. Your first question was the trail conflict of probably higher speed cyclists and family cyclists and joggers and bikers. And certainly our trail system throughout the metro area is attracting a tremendous amount of use. I mean, we're suffering congestion issues on these trails, and need to deal with them in a lot of ways, like other congestion issues. I do think that the higher speed rider is not a good person in that environment. But we need to give them an alternative. We need to give them an adjacent route, similar to that trail along the river, along the greenway, that allows them the speed of travel without the stops every couple of blocks, and a place that they feel safe. And I think if you ask folks, why are you riding here? And they say, well, I feel safer here, there's no cars. Well, if you add a bike lane, if you add a bike boulevard adjacent to that, you're going to see those actually prefer the road over the greenway, because the greenway congestion actually slows them down more than being on the roadway. So, and then other congestion solutions in terms of signage and education and setting expectations on what proper behaviors are on those. And as well as, hey, trails are really popular. People want them. We probably need more of them. You'll see, I visited Minneapolis, and around their lakes they had a trail for pedestrians and a parallel trail for cyclists and a parallel trail for rollerbladers around a lot of the downtown area. So I think there are some instances where separated uses could help also.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak, and wish you the best of luck with your downtown planning transportation issues.
Thank you very much. And
Would it be possible if at least some of the more data aspects of your presentation can be sent electronically to Dennis, and then he can forward some of the stuff, and especially if you've got any additional data or sources or things like that, just for reference for us in the future, that would be.
And we have cards available from Dan with his email address, and also Bicycle Colorado's web address, www.bicyclecolorado.org. And I won't give out your email address. We are on TV. And I should know.
You can find it on the website.
Yes.
They want to get a hold of me. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We do appreciate it. While Charlie's coming to the podium to talk to us, I'll note, for those of you fortunate to watch us on TV, and going forward, we do not have political commercials, and we will not have them between now and November. So this is your best choice in programming. We actually don't have any commercials, but we should, shouldn't we? All right. A little of the background. We had a public hearing at our last meeting regarding a property in the R5 area. We had a discussion about the Sternberg streetlights. We had a discussion about sidewalk width and on-street parking. It raised a few questions, and I think mostly under the purview of the DRC and Public Works. So what I have here on the agenda is item A, sidewalks and street width, B, street and pedestrian lighting, C, on-street and off-street parking, and D, land uses. All of issues we've discussed in relationship to our rewriting of the downtown comprehensive plan. So, Charlie Blostein.
Good evening, Commission. For those who don't know me, I'm Charlie Blostein. I'm the city's Director of Public Services. One of my responsibilities is to implement bicycle facilities in the community, and we did consult with Dan just prior to doing the bicycle lane striping on Mineral Avenue between Broadway and just east of Santa Fe Drive, Jackass Hill Road, and it's worked out quite well. I will say that there are some places that we're looking at to do additional bike lanes. Narrowing streets is an issue. He has identified it as saying, design it to the speed of the vehicles. There's more to it than just that, I will assure you. And we have applied for a grant for $110,000. We awarded it to do a bicycle master plan for the community, and we will start that soon. We will hire a consultant to do the plan for us and look at places where there are locations that will work for additional bike facilities. You did mention the possibility of doing bike sharing at the light rail facility. It's a great idea. I just don't know where they have the space to put in such a large bike rack with the bicycles and a landing area in order to accommodate that without removing parking or significant landscaping. If you go to the RTD Center now, the one downtown, Prince and Alamo, there's a lot of bicycles there. They're stored on the sidewalk. There is a bicycle parking facility that is full. There are people locking their bicycles to fences. They're locking them to light poles. And there's just no more room to put in bicycle facilities at the downtown station. I go past the one on Mineral Avenue a lot, and you will see bicycles locked to fences. And matter of fact, I passed one by yesterday 3 different times. I passed by that bicycle parked against the fence, and it didn't move for the entire day. So you do see them there. And parking next to or adjacent on fences is sometimes preferable to parking them in bike racks. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, but some people like it that way. More power to them, if that's where they want to park. When we do our master plan, which will probably go through the year 2011, we will consult with Dan. He has some great information, but we have to do it for Littleton. We see bicycle riders on Littleton Boulevard. If you ride down Powers, there are 2 traffic circles with neck downs, and there's 2 stop signs between Broadway and Windermere. And there's no way we can avoid the traffic on that street. We want the motorists to drive there. We want them to drive slowly. I have a request in for more stop signs. Bicycle riders don't like stop signs. That's just, while I was listening to Dan for the last hour, I'll give you some feedback. You have to look at it for Littleton. Because what's good for Denver, Boulder, and Portland is not necessarily good for Littleton. I'm familiar with all the improvements they did in Portland. The bike boxes are fascinating. When you have a lot of bike riders, Boulder could use them. But in Littleton, we don't have a lot. We have many, but not so many that we have to design facilities such as that. So let's get back to the agenda that you have here. Because of the public hearing you had a couple of weeks ago, Mrs. Chadbourne, who lives across the street from the dental clinic, raised some questions. We are addressing those. She also brought them to the attention of the City Council. Sidewalks. I gave a lot of thought to this before I came up here tonight, and I thought, why don't I ask you, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to have sidewalks that accommodate the pedestrian as well as the disabled person? And if so, do you want 2 people to walk side by side on a sidewalk in downtown Littleton? Do you want to encourage people to walk in downtown Littleton? Do you want them to walk from light rail to their home on the north side of downtown Littleton? Do you want them to walk on Main Street, Alamo? Do you want that to happen? And do you want 2 people to be able to walk side by side rather than single file? At the dental clinic you discussed some time ago, there's a portion of that sidewalk that is not even 2 feet wide. In order to accommodate a disabled person in a wheelchair, the minimum is 32 inches. The preferred is at least 36. For 2 people to walk side by side on a sidewalk, what I like to say is the romantic couple holding hands. You want to come over here, Dennis? We'll hold hands. I will tell you, we prefer 5 feet.
That's a fairly burly, romantic couple that you are portraying there.
5 feet, you better get to know each other.
You and Dennis, I mean.
Yeah. We need more than 5 feet.
I think you would.
The romantic couple holding hands side by side on a sidewalk need 5 feet. And we try to do that on Main Street where people like to put tables and chairs or merchandise out on the sidewalk. I have to go out there and say, please give 5 feet of space so 2 people can walk side by side. If you don't agree with that position, now's the time to say, oh, we prefer people walk single file, or we don't want them to walk on the sidewalks, or we don't want to accommodate the disabled person in a wheelchair. And I also point out to you the number of sight-impaired people that we have that also need space. And they need a wider space than just what a normal sighted person could see. I didn't mean to use the word normal, just a sighted individual. We have a lot of that in downtown Littleton. We also have impediments in sidewalks. We have furniture, benches, trash cans, trees, signs, fences for people to have in front of their restaurant, such as Abe's is the best example. We have some people that like to put just a table and chairs out there. We have to accommodate all that on the sidewalk. When I say 5 feet, that does not include the area where the tree well is, because a handicapped person can't access across that. 5 feet of clear concrete space for 2 people to walk comfortably side by side. At the dental facility, we aren't going to get 5 feet.
Let me address it this way, since you asked a specific question a couple times, and I'll go to the commissioners. I think what we recognize is a difference between Main Street and the R5 area. And so that was the source of our concern. And with that being said, if we each want to offer Charlie an answer, we can, but I don't know that we're going to go at it that way. I think as far
Don't let me
as
add a
how
little bit onto
wide.
that, because we recognize the difference between Main Street and the residential area. And on Main Street, we actually try to get a lot more than the 5 feet.
Sure.
And actually, in some places, we've gone as wide as 16 feet. What we really want in the residential areas, just like in front of your own house, if you, depending on where you live, is 5 feet. If you were to build a neighborhood subdivision in Littleton right now, the sidewalks would be 5 feet wide. Your streets would be 36 feet wide, flow line to flow line, and a 5-foot sidewalk, either attached or detached. In downtown Littleton, I like to use the term, it is what it is. And some places, we don't even get the 5 feet.
In Columbine Valley, I note there's a lot of places that have no sidewalk.
We have no sidewalks in Littleton in a lot, that's not the way to say it. There are places in Littleton where sidewalks don't exist because of the nature of the street where there are very few homes. The traffic volume is very low, the speed is very low, and people feel comfortable walking in the street. Aberdeen Village being one, the hamlet out on the west side, Beaumar South on the west side. There are streets all over neighborhoods all over Littleton that do not have sidewalks. And it's the nature of the design of the subdivision. In downtown Littleton, which is the subject of your plan, we want people to walk to get to light rail, downtown facilities, parking lots, or go to work. And in order to walk and stay off of the street because of the traffic volumes on those streets, the sidewalks are appropriate. I'll now let you answer the questions.
David.
I think Norm's right on target. I mean, we're not ready to sit here and say it's going to be a flat this or that. It's going to vary, okay? It's going to vary by the character, the use of what's going on, not just in the central area beyond Main Street, but as we proceed through the rest of the city. I think that what brought this issue to the fore with the Old Town Dental PDO was widening the sidewalk at the sacrifice of parking in a situation that was already overcrowded and impinging on the local residents. And did I miss something, or is that what we were, that's what caught our attention. So if somebody wants to put in a 5-foot wide sidewalk or 6 foot along there, that's fine, but look at the consequences. What other dominoes fall because of that?
I did meet with the 2 dentists and talked about widening the sidewalk and the street lighting issue were the 2 main concerns of Ms. Chadbourne. The sidewalk, at one point, the dentist indicated that they were willing to consider removing the retaining wall, relocating it away from the street, and building a wide sidewalk. When their architect came in and said, this is the cost involved, they backed off and said, can we widen out into the street or not do it? I said, not doing it is not an option for the way the DRC or the city staff was pursuing this, but we can go into the street. You heard Mr. Gruig say, if you narrow the street, people drive slower, they're more aware, they get off the phone, they do things differently. I totally agree with that position. Widen the sidewalk into the street by a foot or two, you can still provide the parking. There is one spot in front of the dental clinic at the curve where we may have to eliminate 1 or 2 spaces. And I use the word may being very important, because as we look at it, the traffic volume is low. Can we still provide the parking? And can the motorists still feel comfortable coming around that corner and seeing okay? The dentist and myself, when we walked the situation, we said, why don't we try it? Let's widen the sidewalk and leave the parking and narrow the street. We have all driven on streets that are 10 and a half feet as a lane, and it works. And because of the age of that neighborhood and the interest of providing someplace for people to walk, we think we can accommodate both interests, the parking and the pedestrian. And that's the direction the dentist agreed. Let's give it a try. I'll address just very quickly, as I mentioned, Ms. Chadbourne addressed the lights. She said there were 4 of those Sternberg lights going in front of her house. No, they're not. The entire length of the dental clinic property, we originally thought, let's put in 4 of the Sternberg lights. We reassessed our position, and we said we can get by easily with 3. Only 1 would be in front of Ms. Chadbourne's residence. Just 1. They are the same lights that most people have in their residential neighborhood as far as wattage is concerned, luminaires. It's the same brightness as the residential light in my neighborhood. I live in Sunset. We have a different style. It's called a traditional. The Sternberg light is a different style, but the amount of illumination is exactly the same. Does it go up? Yes. It does.
Can it be modified? There seemed to be some discussion. I think Dennis used the term ballast, but I haven't done any.
Let me address that, because it's a good question. Can it be modified? We can put a shield on one side of the Sternberg light, but not on the street side. It would be on the other side, on the side facing the residence. Let's assume your bedroom window is facing directly towards the light. We can shield it so that it's not shining in your bedroom window. Can we shield it on the street side? No, that doesn't make any sense. But we can provide those lights. Again, the street lights in downtown Littleton, there's actually a plan that was developed back in the late 80s that said, where are we going to put these ornamental street lights? Everybody refers to them as Sternberg. Sternberg's the manufacturer out of Chicago. Well, where are we going to put them? We were going to put them in the football. We were going to cover the area from ACC as far north as Crestline Avenue, between Santa Fe and the railroad tracks. And we were going to put them on the main arterial through town, Main Street, Littleton Boulevard, Main, Alamo, and out to Bowles Avenue, following Bowles all the way to the city limits, which is Sheridan. Council revised that policy in the 90s and said, don't go any further east than Windermere, because that's kind of where the old section of Littleton stops and the newer section begins. And it's also quite an expense. So the street lights stop at Windermere on the east, go out to Bowles Avenue and Sheridan on the west, and they cover the downtown area. Now, only in certain, we haven't covered the whole downtown area because we just don't either have the money or the developers and property owners haven't put them in. If you notice on Prince Street, we actually go all the way north to Santa Fe. Again, that being a ribbon street down the center, it would make sense as you come off of Santa Fe, you enter into the downtown area and you see street lights. The street lights have that yellow glow to them, I'll use the term. Okay? That actually is a warm yellow that kind of gives you the feeling this is a different type of neighborhood than you would see with LED lights, for example. Let me digress for a moment and talk about the Christmas lights we use, the holiday lighting display on Main Street. If you notice, the east end of the holiday lighting display is used with the yellow incandescent lights. And if you go west of Nevada, it's LEDs. And in reality, I'm getting a lot better response of the old yellow incandescent lights than I do out of the high-tech LEDs. Because the old-style yellow incandescent fit the theme of downtown. People seem to think that works better. The way it doesn't work is on the Christmas tree. That's all LEDs. That whole plaza is done in LED. LEDs are more expensive to buy, they're cheaper to operate, they last longer, but if you're trying to get that feeling, that character, it appears that the old style light is a better fit. And it does work. Right now it's 50-50. And I'm saying, okay, which way do we go? The trend is, oh, LEDs are so wonderful, let's do all of them in LEDs. But when I do it, people say, you know, it just doesn't have the same feeling and appearance that you were trying to convey originally. The same thing is true with the Sternbergs. The Sternbergs are that warm yellow that are pedestrian-oriented and make people feel comfortable when they're walking. It's a very low light display of illumination.
Charlie, I have a question. In the rest of that R5, is the same concentration of lights as you would have in front of that dentist office throughout the R5?
Good point, Kurt. No, in the residential area, you want to spread them out a little more. Ms. Chadbourne was correct. The residential area ought to be treated a little bit different than the Main Street, Alamo Avenue, Prince Street area where there are residences, and we would spread them out more. I will tell you, we do use them in residential areas other than downtown. The Centennial neighborhood across the river, River Point is the big tall building, 24-hour fitness and that shopping center, Home Depot. Centennial Drive and Prince Street along there all have Sternberg lights. And the south side of that street is all residential. We have used the Sternbergs in some other locations where the developer was trying to give that feeling that the Sternbergs convey. So we have used them in some other residential areas. People like them. You know, they give you, it's an old style lamp.
To follow up on Kurt's comment, your spacing on Main Street and Prince then is about what?
About 60 feet.
About 60. And then in the R5 or the more residential area?
We might go 75 to 90 feet.
Okay.
Again, we'll kind of look at where they need to go.
Right.
We try to put them on property lines. We try to put them at locations where it makes sense and it fits the design, putting them at intersections. So, and I think she made a very valid point, and that is, just don't go with your 60-foot spacing automatically. Give us something different in the residential neighborhood. I suggest we don't eliminate them. I suggest we be very selective on where they go, and again, try to avoid people's bedroom windows.
Linda, you look like you were next, and you've been
What is
quiet.
the spacing at the dentist's office, the spacing of those lamps?
We decided on 3 lights, one at the corner of Crestline and I think that's Nevada, right on the corner, across or behind from the Essex House. We decided on one right on that curve, and if you remember the dental clinic, there was is it concave or convex? The curve goes like this, and we were going to put it right on the curve point, and then one at that north property line. And Commissioner, I don't remember how many feet that is, but the dentist thought that that was very reasonable. They actually wanted some of the light to protect their own property, have people feel comfortable there. And especially we widen the sidewalk, we might encourage people to walk. You know, you heard Dan talk all about encouraging people to ride bikes. We want to do both.
Sure. Craig?
Yeah, my recollection of the discussion was, my personal concern about the Sternberg or the pedestrian lights was that, it seems to me that there'd be a hierarchy. The arterial streets, Main Street, Prince Street would have, something, and I wasn't aware that there was a sort of a plan to put them throughout the central area. But I think what I'm hearing from you is that if the whole central area was to redevelop, or if money became available, that they would be on every street within the
A
central area.
unifying factor. It ties the neighborhood together. We're rebuilding Rio Grande this direction, out here from north of Crestline, where the Lexan development is, all the way to Main Street. And we are working with Excel to put the Sternberg lights at least on the west side of that street between Main Street and Crestline. Again, not going north of Crestline. That has become incredibly challenging. Talk about fitting a narrow street and shoehorning in. I will tell you, you don't want to talk on the cell phone while you're driving down Rio Grande through some of that. It is very tight, and I don't know where we can put the lights in, but we're going to try and fit in where we can along the way. And, of course, part of that is residential because there's an apartment building right across the street from us. Okay. There are residences on Prince Street. There are residences on Main Street and Alamo where we have the Sternberg lights. It's not just confined to the commercial area.
They also have inserts, I believe, or other types of PED lights, not necessarily the Sternberg. They do have inserts that direct the light downward to meet, not 100% dark sky compliant, but they do have some types of inserts.
Yeah, of course, the street lights are exempt from the lighting code. And because of the nature of the globe, to try and retrofit that to accommodate, it just doesn't work.
I know.
Either you do it or you don't do it, and try to...
They look kind of odd if you try to do it.
The design it by committee is not the way to do it. I can shield a residence on the side of the light, the residence, and I can't do it on the other side of the street. And we have done that on occasion. But those lights are very low glow. As compared to the overhead Cobra lights,
oh yeah.
Those, again, we're working with Excel to say, can you design those to force all the light down? Because that's, in my opinion, the best light to work that with.
And just going back to the sidewalk with issue again, my recollection was per the code, ideally they would have had to build additional off-street parking, and we were really trying to avoid that,
right.
Especially because it would have been just about impossible to put it behind the building, and it would have been unsightly at best to put it in front of the building. And so to maximize the amount of on-street parking to allow them to go ahead with their expansion seemed to be the best way to do it. And there are a couple spots that could be picked up if the road width would allow that. And looking at the right-of-way that was available there, those retaining walls in the front are in the right-of-way. So there could have been a way to require them, it seems, to move that retaining wall back to make the...
I suppose we could.
The cost is an issue, and I'm not sure...
It would have killed the project.
Yeah, so that's...
This is a very successful business, two dentists who really are interested in making an improvement in the neighborhood without necessarily adding a whole lot of patience. And patience, not patience. And... we're working with them on that. Narrow streets in a neighborhood that was designed in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, there's nothing wrong with it. It's interesting, Curtis Street, just north of Main Street, it's one of the oldest parts of Littleton. We have a sewer line there that dates earlier than 1919, because that's the earliest our maps go back, and the sewer line is shown there. It's still in operation today. Working just fine. A sewer line that is approaching 100 years old. Well, some of those streets are 100 years old. And you know something? That's part of the character of downtown Littleton. If we were to make every street 36 feet wide to allow parking on both sides with 5-foot sidewalks and everything, it wouldn't have the character. And if you don't agree with me, I'll be glad to converse with you on it, because that's part of what makes Littleton, downtown Littleton, what it is.
Oh, I agree. Pavlos.
No, I think, it's been hit again. I appreciate the fact that you're trying to make the accommodation, because I was one of the people that also brought up the motion on that, just make it clear, it wasn't, we didn't want the sidewalks. It was that in that particular corner at the very end of a street where there's not a lot of through pedestrian traffic, where else would you go? You would, unless you were walking from there to the Essex, and how much traffic comes in that way when there are other ways. If we had to lose on-site parking in order to widen the sidewalks, that seemed like...
Right.
But if you can accommodate, absolutely.
We may
What you
have
suggested,
a
I
10-foot
think...
driving lane. We may have an 8-foot parking lane. This isn't a place to ride a bike because somebody opens the door. It's going to be it. But you can ride a bike on the travel lane because it's such a low-volume, slow-speed street, and the sidewalk can fit with the parking. We may lose a space or two at the most, and we're actually trying to do it to accommodate those two that we talked about.
So one thing that I wanted to ask about the losing a space or two, I don't know whether there is any way that on-street parking can be designated as compact vehicles, the way that a lot of parking lots are, that way that you bring in a small one and restrict it as a way of maybe keeping, again, I don't know because that's regulated by a lot of
It's actually not a
different
bad
things.
idea to look at. That's reasonable.
The other thing that I want to state, and I understand that cost and retrofitting is difficult, I just want to express very strong personal support for dark sky compliant as much as possible. I think that light pollution is an issue that becomes greater and greater, and as energy becomes more expensive, actually illuminating the sky becomes a complete waste of money.
Absolutely agree. And
so
that's why I think it's those Cobra overhead lights that need to be redesigned in order to accommodate exactly that point, force the light down, shield it so it doesn't get wasted. But you're absolutely right, Pablos. It can be done. But working with Xcel Energy to get the right light and to get it done like that is...
I do not envy you.
Very challenging.
But I just want to express strong support for that, especially when we're installing new lights. I know the expense and the difficulty retrofitting existing lights because it's difficult, but to the extent to which from this point on we can make sure that new lights remain dark sky compliant.
Hey, Charlie, just kind of in response to it, it might be worthwhile just going through kind of what the process is that we work with Xcel, that they actually provide the lights and maintain the lights. So you can talk a little bit more about that, because I'm not sure everybody's aware of that.
Yeah, when a neighborhood wants a street light, we actually turn to Xcel Energy because they own the lights, and they provide the electricity for them. Their catalog for light selection is very small. Matter of fact, we were the first city to do the Sternberg lights, ornamental lights. We did this back in the 1980s. We actually picked that light out of the catalog, the base, the pole, the globe, and we said, we want that design. It was a puzzle. We put these pieces together. We want it to look exactly like that. We were the first city. Other cities are now using that. They're also using other Xcel Energy catalog lights. We set the standard. And our goal is to say, okay, here's the style we want. Now our job is to say, if you're going to put in those Cobra heads, we want you to use more creativity to reduce the glare that gets wasted. I totally agree with that position, and I think we're working on that.
Let's go down this way. Julio, and then I think I saw another hand down there.
Charlie, I'm somewhat I guess I don't know exactly how to start, but I do want to, so I'm going to float around a little bit, but the things I'm going to say are probably going to be, I hope they don't offend you. That's not my goal.
I can always get up and walk out, Julio. You can.
Pardon me?
I can get up and walk out.
I know you can. And I may
You
get
invited
you to.
me,
And I
remember?
may get you to. You never know.
Don't insult your guest.
Well, I'll try not to. But you made a couple of references that I'm kind of confused about. One of which, just a moment ago, you said that there was some kind of a policy that was created by City Council on the Sternberg lights. Saying that, who holds the policy book and who maintains it? Because I've been on here now for a good long period of time, and I've never seen a policy book.
It was done in the 1980s. I know it was after 87. It was a plan that we submitted to City Council saying, here is a light that we think we want to use in downtown Littleton. Here is the area we want to use it along with Littleton Boulevard out to Bowles Avenue. And the City Council adopted it back in the 80s. And it's just a plan, and the plan said this is the light fixture and the design we will use to unify this portion of Littleton as being unique. And that was done in the 80s, and we've been doing that for the last 20 years, 20-something years ever since.
I guess the concern that I have is, you know, it was that last zoning that kind of caught my attention when I heard that there was going to be either 3 or 4 Sternberg lights in that particular area, which is the R5. And I guess in my mind, I look at that particular R5 area not as a commercial centerpiece, but more of a residential centerpiece, to the point where I really don't care, one, if the sidewalks get widened, personally. 2, if we've agreed already to have a facility such as the dentist and it's 19 required spaces and it can barely get 2, I could care less, or 3. The bottom line is, you know, I'm not going to worry about that. That's an existing residential area that's been there a long time. It wasn't created for commercial, and here we are trying to put a square peg in a round hole again. So I guess my comment is, I'm very concerned about where and how, and this is the part that I think is even going to be more offensive, but is how can DRC come to the conclusions they come to with such administrative latitude without ever coming up with a plan that the public and, for that matter, the Planning Commission to see, look at, and either agree or disagree with. And I guess that's where it's kind of chafing me a little bit on this whole thing. I'm getting a little bit, you know, I appreciate the fact that you have something that happened back in 87, but don't you think it's time we see it? I do.
The Planning Commission in 1987 may have seen it.
I don't care about 1987. I'm talking about 2010.
We'll be glad to show it.
I want to see it. I want to see if it's even worth having it, because I don't know if I agree with it anymore.
Okay.
Personally, this is the first time in all the years I've been here that I've even heard about it, but I had to hear the whole thing through a public hearing, and how all of a sudden Public Works or DRC decided that they're going to put these type of lights in a residential area. I'm opposed to it. I am so opposed to it.
Julio, they've been in residential areas since we first started them.
No, I bet you tell me what the percentage of Sternberg lights you have in the city of Littleton as a percentage. Less than 10%, maybe?
I don't know.
Well, I'm betting that it's not more than 10, and maybe even 5, for all I know. But I'll tell you, it's not in my neighborhood, and I'm glad it's not in my neighborhood because I'd fight it there.
Okay.
And the bottom line is, I don't like an area that we've been working on for 2 years. It's nothing new that we've been working on here, that all of a sudden Charlie and DRC can come out and put a plan out there that we never even see, and we're doing the comp plan. I'm upset about that.
Let me interject here for a moment. I did find in the downtown design standards 1.3.4, and I think I saw Dennis making notes on building lighting. They include in that section .04 to avoid significant night sky light pollution, in 05 to avoid glare into residential uses. So there is some in here. Now, that's sort of subjective. David, did you want to look like you were getting
Work up.
well, or getting something together there?
Well, I'm going to go on both sides of the fence here. Somewhere in all the documents that we've gotten on zoning ordinances and downtown design standards and guidelines, there has to be something referencing this policy that we have as a reference. If we haven't gotten it, we should get it. And if there's anything else like that, we should get it. Because in the end, references in the design standards or downtown design standards and guidelines are great. Planning Commission's responsible for those. DRC may generate it, but we're the ones that can say yay or nay. If in the process of redoing, of updating comp plan, we decide that for particular areas, not just downtown as the entire football, but for particular areas within that football, the attractive traditional Sternberg lights are great for Main Street and Prince and the main thoroughfares where it's mostly commercial with the exception of the odd, apartment here and there. That's not to say we have to continue to treat the R5 zone, the R5 area, the same way. It's a different character. The attractive light that looks good to the passersby and even the people sitting on their porch in the daytime becomes an entirely different issue at night when the light starts coming into your bedroom window or on your porch and that sort of thing. And that's fully within the purview of the Planning Commission. So we can decide that, and we don't have to decide it now. But the dental PDO brought it forward. One of the residents decided to make an issue of it for good reason. It's her ox being gored. I don't think she's going to be terribly calmed by the fact that only one of the lights is going to be in front of her house, because that means the other two are going to be in front of somebody else's house. This whole thing, the lighting, the sidewalk, the parking, had we really been that concerned about the impact on the neighborhood, then we were perfectly free to vote no on the application 2 weeks ago. One of us did. Charlie, I understand what you're saying. It's a going business. It's a very successful business. It's been a long-time contributor to the neighborhood and the community. Guess what? Sometimes you outgrow your facility. City building moved out of Town Hall. Library moved out of the Carnegie building. Change happens. And sometimes when a use is no longer appropriate, it's appropriate to move someplace else, preferably within the community, make room for somebody else to use that facility. That may be what we should have decided last week, rather than trying to patch together all these compromises on parking that's way under what it should be, and lighting that's more appropriate to commercial zone than residential, and sidewalks that are indeterminate as to whether they're lovers side by side. Maybe they're both in wheelchairs. What's that mean? Then we have to be 7 feet wide? I don't know. I think we had an opportunity to draw a line in the sand consistent with what we've been talking about for 2 years. We may have missed it. Now it's up to City Council.
All right, commissioners, you got two of them fired up. It's not that hard to do. I've seen them get exercise before. Linda, did you have something?
No, not now.
Let me widen this out. We've got about 15 minutes left. One of the things that I emailed Dennis about and wanted to bring into the discussion was indicating, when we have a hearing like this, what items are under our jurisdiction, and with the help of the city attorney, we sort of got into that discussion at the hearing. And my first suggestion was along the lines of a sidebar on the PDO document. Dennis has talked to Jan about that. I think that would be probably an easy first step, is to say, okay, here's some items such as sidewalks and lighting. Other facets may occur in other neighborhoods in other parts of the city. But I believe at this point, and I think we would be well served to hear from Jan, because she's been considering this, and she talked a little bit to me about what their process of going back and reviewing past decisions and finding information. So I think in our discussions of how to understand and how to deal with this, I guess I'll call it a situation, that's probably overstating it, but I would be interested to know if the commissioners would like to have her ruin another evening of hers and address us at one of the study sessions on how to separate out perhaps what DRC asks of an applicant based on their understanding of policy, and maybe we can bring in some other things other than sidewalks and Sternberg lighting and see where we need to go to address things. Does that sound reasonable? Do we need to make a formal motion, or can we?
My question to that matter would be, is that something that Dennis can address? Because for one thing, Jen is not the only person that comes in front of us with plans. And second, second, Dennis as the acting director and the person that you happen to be here anyway, unless you think otherwise, I would feel that you could just as well explain it, and we don't have to bring Jan down here, and then you can come in and speak for the department instead of.
Absolutely. And
so
bring some examples too, if that would be helpful.
So I would agree. I would just point out that I think that can.
I'm also thinking we have a case that's coming up fairly soon that we actually could use as a testing ground in terms of what really works. How did she explain this information most effectively, and what's your reaction to how she's proposing it? So we can try different things and see, but she thought that we had some test runs coming up that might work. And as Norm was saying, our concern is that when you look at the Mylar as it's filed, as the drawings that come before you, if you put too much information on them, it gets very confusing 5 years, 10 years down the road when you don't remember the conversation, you don't know why it's on there, and you're really looking for some very key information. So to the extent we can to separate it out, as Norm said, maybe in a sidebar or on in the staff report or someplace else, might be more, certainly from the staff's perspective and for anybody that's looking at those, would be a more effective way to do it. But we certainly understand the need and are very, understanding of the desire, I think, to do that. So we're very interested in trying some different things. So.
All of that with the advice of the city attorney. Dave?
Presumably, whatever DRC or the other departmental reviews produce and submit as part of staff presentation for an application, their decisions are consistent with published policy, ordinance, design guidelines, that sort of thing, that we have accessible to us when we're evaluating the recommendation and determining whether we agree that it is consistent with those standards, right? I mean, is there some gap there that?
To some degree, I guess the only thing is that we are limited in terms of what our actual purview is. And so there's some things that we don't have control over the right-of-way, for example.
I'm sorry, the what?
We don't have control over the public right-of-way. So, yes, we have access to that, but our questioning that gets into, is the policy correct or not? And I think that's the appropriate place for Planning Commission to have some kind of discussion in terms of, is that a policy that you would say maybe inconsistent with what you're trying to achieve in the comp plan? So.
My bigger concern is dealing with the fact that it appears that DRC is shooting from the hip on a lot of this stuff, and it doesn't have a lighting plan for this area. To the best of my knowledge, it doesn't have a lighting plan, period, for the city. So I guess that's just one example. And yet, you have DRC drawing conclusions on where it wants to see certain things occur for what appears to be arbitrary and capricious reasoning. And I have a problem with that.
Well, I think you know as well as I do that the engineering part of it is much more quantitative than we are in planning side. So they really do have standards, national standards that they follow. So certainly in terms of saying it's arbitrary, they are following specific standards when you talk about anything in the public right-of-way.
But the standards that we have to follow are those that are approved by the city council. And if we don't know about some of those that have been approved by the city council, whose shame is it?
Well, I guess, yeah, I certainly agree in terms of we need to have as much information as possible. There's some things that we may not get into in terms of right-of-way, width, that type of thing. I mean, we certainly have all those
You're talking to the choir on a lot of those,
sure,
but I'm talking about the stuff where there's a gap,
sure.
And there was an obvious gap created by the presentation that occurred a couple of weeks ago over this very issue, and where DRC itself continues to be the leader of creating the gap. And I have a real problem with that.
Okay, we can have that discussion.
Given the fact that one of the consistent pieces of, or opinions we got back from the public outreach was city processes and standards and that sort of thing need to be clear, need to be unambiguous, need to be accessible. It's bad enough, transparent, it's bad enough to find out that they may not know about some of these little standards or policies or whatever, but to find out that the Planning Commission doesn't have access to them either, that's abominable.
Let me go down here to Pavlos. He looked like he had something.
Yeah, I mean, I'd concur. I think, what David said earlier about, I think it's high time that we figure out what policies and other exist, and and they get presented to us. And now, so I'm not going to beat the dead horse. I think that's fairly obvious. I'm in agreement with what's
You
been
can certainly
said.
put together a list of what you kind of major things, and if you've got additional things, but in terms of, right-of-way width and sidewalk width and the light standards and all those things.
But I agree, there are certain things that are outside of the purview of the DRC. That's not what we're asking. We're asking for things that the DRC is taking into consideration in its plannings that we are not aware of. So the issue is not we're asking for everything that we cannot possibly have any opinion or you can have any opinion in, but we know of at least one thing that influences decision, that guides the decisions of the DRC that we're not aware of. If there are more than those are the ones that we should have. Another thing that I want to add, just jumping aside a little bit on the whole question of Norm brought in of how the DRC operates on what decisions, a question that I have that's been asked of me from neighbors and fellow citizens, and I think in this economy has become a little bit more thing, is what happens to all those applications that have been approved and are not being acted on. I mean, there's a number of applications that we approved on Spectrum. Others have been approved by previous planning commissions, Marathon. We now...
So your question is, so like Spectrum, in that situation, the owner went away.
Yes.
So what you approved is still in place.
I think to some extent in terms of...
What you approved, but typically it's there. So if someone comes along and wants to do something different, they're going to have to come back through the review process. Is that where you're heading?
Well, and I think to some extent is how does the DRC, because some things, if they need significant change, they're going to have to come back to us and possibly also in front of City Council. There are other things that are handled within the DRC only, the same way that when we approve a PD or a PDO, we don't figure out everything. Some things are going to go back to you and the DRC, and they're going to be sorted out. What I'd like to be addressed additionally, is there any policy or procedure, any way that is handled differently if a developer comes in trying to revive a project that was approved by somebody else, say 5 or 10 years ago? Is there any additional level of review to say what was approved in 1987 may not be appropriate for 2010, but they're beginning to do the same? We have the current incident of Aspen Grove, right? Again, people are looking at this, and in the issue of transparency, I would just say that that's an additional topic that I'd like to see addressed.
I think it's interesting because we've been talking about that in-house a little bit too, just with staff and with the City Council and during the budget hearings a little bit in terms of, we've got some very old zoning, on the books, which may no longer be appropriate. So what should the City Council, what should Planning Commission decide to do about that? But it's a big issue in terms of this stuff that continues and has no sunset clause to it, has no way of going away. It is on the books and may no longer be appropriate. In a lot of cases, what happens is it's no longer appropriate for the market either. And so often the owner will want to come back and change it, even if, I think there's a lot of connection there. I'm really hearing your concerns on this. I want you to make sure that we get back to, though, and we'll try and respond to the extent we can, that the key thing we really want to hear and we really need is that larger policy in terms of what are we trying to achieve, because each of those policies and each of those standards should be really looking at the larger policy that Planning Commission and City Council set. So if there's something major that you're seeing, and I agree you have to know what they are, but most of them have been implemented. So if you see stuff around, if you don't like the way the lights work in the neighborhood, they don't like they look on Wilton Boulevard, if you don't like other things, I think we've got some examples. It's not like we're saying this is all theoretical. This has been in place for 20 years. So we've got a way to walk down every street, look at how it affects the adjoining properties. If you haven't walked down every street in downtown, I really encourage you to go and do that and see, is it working? Are the sidewalks working? Is the lighting working? Because it really get a better sense, I think, of are the standards appropriate or not.
Let's go, Linda, something.
I was just
quick.
going to make a snide comment.
Oh.
Boy, if you had my opinions on everything, I think we'd be here till probably 2 weeks from now.
Okay, well, that sets the agenda for
summarize.
next time, doesn't it? Let's move to discussion of upcoming meetings if we can, Commissioners. We've got a couple things that we've brought up, and I think Dennis can probably fill us in. Are we agreed that, well, first off, let's offer Charlie our thanks. Thank you for coming in. We needed that input, and whether or not we're all comfortable with the situation as it is, your experience, not only with the streets and the right-of-ways, is invaluable to us. And I'll just say thank you for me. I think the commissioners also would appreciate it. As one quick sidebar, if we're discussing bike lanes and circulation and such pedestrian items, it seems possible that those all are outside our purview on any given plan at this point. So maybe we can pursue that. Are we generally agreed that unless Jan chooses to appear, Dennis can present whatever she suggests? I'm fine with that. We'll leave it to staff to work that out. All right. Go ahead.
Can I do a sidebar to your sidebar?
Please.
A few lumens in lighting level, or a couple of feet in a placement, or a couple of foot added to or taken away from a sidewalk width, or that sort of thing. In the overall scheme of things, nobody's going to die because of it, hopefully. But I have to tell you, unwritten policy, unknown policy or not, the next time I see an application that talks about narrowing a street and doesn't have input from safety services, I'm going to vote no on principle. You want to talk about narrowing streets, that's fine. That may not be within our purview. But if you're doing it and creating a safety hazard and fire and police don't weigh in on it, and we have a serious gap and we cannot make a responsible decision. That's just for future reference from me.
And just to remind everybody that fire and police are on the regular referral list, and so they do review every application that comes through. So we don't always see the review.
Yeah, well, we didn't get them on the last one.
Right. They don't always.
Sometimes they don't have anything to say, or maybe they don't consider it in the same light that we see it. Okay, our next meeting is a week.
Week from
That'll
tonight.
give you time to keep your enthusiasm level high. It's again a study session or a special meeting. And what else do we have here? Monday, September 28th.
Which is actually a Tuesday.
Tuesday, it's my fault. I'm sorry.
Because
Yep. Tuesday.
both Monday and
Yeah, that's right.
the 27th and 28th can't both be on Monday.
No, I apologize.
That's in the City Council chamber, which is here. The City Council Forum, District 4, and then October 11th looks like another special meeting for us here.
We have a regular meeting and the second meeting in October. At this point, the first one will be a special meeting. And Councilman Brinkman is the person in District 4. So just
Right. All right. It looks like we have about maybe less than a minute. Shall we adjourn? Is there a motion? Oh, Jenny,
Oh,
did you?
I just
Yes, I'm
wanted to
sorry.
say one thank you to Charlie on your hub this last week. It talked about the hiking through history, the proposed city ditch trail, and just wanted to say thank you for the work on that, because I think it's really going to be an asset for Littleton.
Will it have lights? Never mind.
You're cruel.
All right. Is there a
And
motion?
move the way adjourned?
And a second?
Second.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. Looks like we're about on time. Thank you, commissioners and staff. And we gained an audience member, at least in person along the way.
Very good to see you.
Good night.